start with what the Prime Minister said in his education speech. The Prime Minister came along in his education speech and he said they were going to cut the early years, they were going to cut schools, they were going to cut colleges, cuts in education spending. Mr. Deputy Speaker, shortchanging education today means we cannot build a recovery for all tomorrow. And it's most worrying of all of the National Health Service. Because, you see, because of these huge cuts that they've announced, and all of the members opposite will have to go and justify this to their constituents, or because of the massive cuts they've announced, it means there'll be colossal cuts planned, and I emphasise planned, in defence, in policing, in local government. But they won't be able to deliver those cuts, so they'll end up cutting the National Health Service. That is the secret plan that dare not speak its name today. And he didn't tell us. And he didn't tell us. You can tell they're really worried about it, Mr. Deputy Speaker. They're worried about it. And the Chancellor didn't tell us that his plans also continue massive cuts to social care.
Yes. I think the Defence Minister and myself don't want to fall out. If there's some letters to sign on her desk, it might be better if she can't keep quiet. Miliband.
And they didn't tell us that, of course, their plans involve massive cuts to social care as well. We've already in this Parliament seen hundreds of thousands fewer elderly people being cared for. And what is the lesson, Mr. Deputy Speaker? If you devastate social care, you betray the elderly and you pile unsustainable pressure on our National Health Service. And these two are coming along and promising more of the same. That's why they can't be trusted on the National Health Service. Mr. Deputy Speaker, building a truly national recovery needs a new government. We won't sit by while people are on 0 hours contracts month after month, year after year. Instead, we will legislate for a new principle that if you do regular hours, you get a regular contract. He talked about the minimum wage in his statement. Let's talk about what's happened on the minimum wage. Let's talk about what's happened on the minimum wage.
Mr. Williamson, be helpful to the Chamber, or I will be unhelpful to you, and I don't want to get to that stage. Right, Honourable Miliband.
The minimum wage has gone up by just 70 pence in this Parliament. A Labour government will raise it by more than double that to a minimum wage of more than £8 an hour. And we will have a real industrial policy. The Chancellor has been a particularly malign influence in this government on climate change, because the Prime Minister used to claim that he believed in climate change. I mean, it is extraordinary, I have to say, Mr. Deputy Speaker, even by his standards, to put a wind turbine on your roof and then want a moratorium on wind turbines. I know he's a stranger to consistency, but even by his standards, that's going some. But we will end the dabbling with climate change denial, have a proper green investment bank. And yes, Mr. Deputy Speaker, a Labour government will support the young, not make them pay the price of hard times. We'll ensure that every major government contract will guarantee apprenticeships. And yes, Mr. Deputy Speaker, we will cut tuition fees to £6,000 to reduce the burden of debt on young people. And let the Deputy Prime Minister defend his broken promises on the doorstep. And all of this will be underpinned by a balanced plan that cuts the deficit every year, protects education and health, and has fairer taxes. And Mr. Speaker, I do believe in a progressive tax system, reversing his millionaires' tax cut. A mansion tax to fund the NHS, and abolishing the vindictive, unfair bedroom tax that he imposed.